we are going to discuss the topic of Hindi journalism, that is, the rising and growth of Hindi journalism. It is part of the subject Introduction to Journalism. It's very important to note that modern day Hindi is not as it was spoken in the yesteryears. Rather, it has emerged over a period of years. So, Hindi was spoken in various dialects, and it is the brilliance of varied poets, writers, journalists, and literature scholars of India who have contributed to the rising of the Hindi that is spoken today. So, Mishra sir in his research paper defines 5 phases in the history of the Hindi press and its journey towards the modern day Hindi. So, he says that in this process, Hindi has gone through 5 distinct phases of transformation. And for us, while we are understanding Hindi journalism, it is very important to know these 5 phases. The first phase, the beginning phase, that is from 1826 to 1866. The second phase, the Harish Chandra phase, that is from 1867 to 1899. The third phase is the literary phase, that is from 1900 to 1919. The fourth phase, the Gandhian phase, that is from 1920 to 1947. And the fifth phase, the post-independence phase, from 1948 to the present. So, now let us go in a detailed look at these 5 phases in this module. So, the first phase, the beginning phase, 1826 to 1866. Scholars in the history of Indian journalism trace the first weekly paper in Hindi to be Oodhund Martand, published by Jugal Kishore Shukla in Kolkata in 1826. Earlier years it was known as Calcutta. In the case of Oodhund Martand, Jugal Kishore Shukla applied for a concession in postal fees for the first 8 copies of his paper, but it was rejected. It could not sustain itself, and that's why this paper closed down in 1827, barely within a year of beginning publication. It is during this time that popular social reformist Raja Ram Mohan Roy, who was also known for his intellectual skills and his strong opinions against social evils like sati, brought out a newspaper himself. So, Raja Ram Mohan Roy wrote many articles opposing sati and other social evils that had ingrained themselves in the Hindu culture. He wrote against the orthodox ideas that perpetrated these social evils in religion and in society at large. His paper Bangadut, which was published in 1829, was actually printed in 4 languages, namely English, Bangla, French and Nagri, that is a Hindi dialect, which highlighted all the above issues. Banaras Akhbar, another Hindi newspaper with local news and some translations from Sanskrit law books, was also started in Kashi in the year 1845 with Govind Raghunath Thate as editor. The paper had 44 subscribers. Another paper called Martand was also published in 1846 by Maulvi Nazruddin, which consisted of 5 languages including Hindi, Urdu, Bengali, Persian and English, and all these 5 in one paper in 5 columns. Another paper that was published during this time was Malwa Akhbar, which was started in 1848 in the state of Madhya Pradesh by Prem Narayan ji. In the meanwhile, the publisher of Oodhund Martand, that is Jugal Kishore Shukla, made another attempt in 1850 at starting one more Hindi newspaper in Kolkata or Calcutta as it was called, and the paper's name was Samtand Martand, while Naran Mohan Mitra started another newspaper in Khariboli, another dialect of Hindi called the Sudhakar in the same year. In 1854, the first bilingual daily in Hindi and Bengali by Shyam Sundar Sen was published in Kolkata. It was called Samachar Sudha Parshad, and it had a continuity for almost 14 years. It is often considered as the first Hindi daily, despite the fact that it was bilingual and that Oodhund Martand was published before it. In 1857, a paper with strong political views with a view of Hindu-Muslim unity for the freedom of India was published, and that was called Payam-e-Azadi. So, Payam-e-Azadi was a brainchild of Azimullah Khan, and it was edited by Mirza Bedar Bhakt. Azimullah Khan was very well aware of the divide and rule policy of the British, and he tried his best to conscientize the people about the same through this paper. Gautam Chattopadhyay, in his article Petition, Protest and Revolt, the changing face of the anti-imperialist press in India during the years 1857 to 1947, writes that the paper Payam-e-Azadi started publication from Delhi in February 1857 in Hindi and Urdu, and right from May 1857, it openly supported the rebels. In September 1857, its Marathi edition was published from Jhansi, and it became truly the central organ of the revolt. Copies of this journal are now available only in the British Library. So you see, there were a lot of papers in this beginning phase. There were much more, but we have mentioned just a few, which is enough for you to help you for your exams. Now let us look at the second phase, the Harish Chandra phase, 1867 to 1899. One of the major contributors to Hindi literature and journalism at large was a great Indian writer who is also called the father of modern Hindi, and his name was Harish Chandra Bhartendu. Harish Chandra Bhartendu's influence most probably was his father Gopalachandra, who was a poet himself and wrote in Brij Bhasha, a dialect of Hindi and not exactly the modern Hindi that is spoken today. Before Bhartendu, the prose of Hindi was being written in three styles: Brij Bhasha prose, prose in Khari Boli, and prose in Rajasthani, which was limited to religious tales, commentaries, love stories, and historical tales. Other dialects which are considered quite close to Hindi are Awadhi, Nagri, and other Maithili languages. Bhartendu started his career with Kavi Vachanasudha, the first poetic literary magazine, in 1867, and the Harish Chandra magazine, which was later christened Harish Chandra Chandrika in 1872. It was a monthly newspaper with poetry, literature, travel, satirical and humorous essays, etc. In 1874, he also started Bal Bodhini, a woman's journal in Hindi. Harish Chandra is attributed for the drastic rise of the literary Hindi and its promulgation. In the book Role of Media in National Building, edited by Anand Shankar Singh, Amit Kumar Dubey in his article writes that the Hindi press began to make the mark in 1867 with the publication of bilingual journals such as the Gyan Deepak and the Kavi Vachanasudha. A flood of high literary quality materials then followed, but most of them lived a very short life because of the lack of public support. In 1869, Pap Mochan and Jagat Samachar were started, and in 1870 you had Buddhi Vilas and Agra Akhbar. All of these made their appearance gradually. The other Hindi journals and papers from 1877 to 1900 include Kavi Sudha in 1877 from Banaras, Baste-ul-Ashkiyan from Aligarh, and a bilingual Hindi-English monthly newspaper called The Aryan in 1878 by Reverend J. Hewlett. Amit Kumar Dubey adds a few more names like Dharma Pracharak, Bharat Chandrodaya, Dharm Prakash, Abla Hitkarak, Shubh Samvad, Prayag Mitra, and all these names that existed in those days. I have mentioned a few names. You can add all the names when you read the details in your notes. Mrinal Chatterjee in her paper History of Hindi Journalism mentions a few more papers that contributed to Hindi journalism in this area. She adds the names of papers like Bharat Mitra or Sar Sudha Nidhi or Uchit Vakta, Bangavasi, and all of these papers which contributed in this area. Now there have been many newspapers in this time slot. While we are doing this module online, it is difficult for me to mention all the names of these papers, and these are available on my blog, which will be made available to the students in the links given to them. We shall now go to the third phase, that is the literary phase, which started from 1900 to 1919. Some of the stalwart papers that made a difference are Saraswati, Abhyudaya and many other papers which revolutionized the era in their times. Acharya Mahavir Prasad Dwivedi was a man known for his expertise in literature, history. It was under the editorship that Saraswati, a newspaper in Khadi Hindi, gained huge prominence. Another sub-editor named Ganesh Shankar Vidyarthi contributed his mite to Saraswati too. At a later stage in 1930, Vidyarthi started his own newspaper called Pratap, which gained huge popularity. He was a social reformist and often highlighted in his paper the plight of the suffering farmers of Raebareli and other suffering people in the Indian states. Abhyudaya by Pandit Madan Mohan Malviya was another Hindi weekly which also contributed massively during this time to the Indian freedom struggle. At a later stage, he also founded the Hindustan Dainik in Hindi in 1936, which rose to a very big popularity. There were other newspapers like Vijay that worked immensely for the freedom struggle and were launched in the year 1980 in Delhi by Pandit Indravidya Vachaspati. This paper was inspired by Swami Shraddhanand, who contributed many nationalist articles too. It strongly opposed the Rowlatt Act with a series of articles written very well by Swami Shraddhanand, who was also a lawyer by profession and very meticulous in his opinion. But after his departure to Lahore, the paper could not survive and it succumbed in 1920. Besides this, there were many other papers that contributed to nationalism, freedom from the tyranny of Britishers, and Hindu-Muslim unity. These include popular newspapers like Biswamitra or Viswamitra as you call it in 1960, started by Mahindra Chandra Agarwal. Now here too there were many newspapers. I am not able to mention all of them and you might excuse my pronunciation, but in the Indian history there have been lot of newspapers that have contributed to the Indian freedom struggle. Now let us take a look at the next phase, that is the Gandhian phase from 1920 to 1947. Swarajya was started in 1920 by T. Prakasham, Sainik by Krishnadat Paliwal in Agra, Desh by Babu Rajendra Prasad in Patna, Swami Shraddhanand's Veer Arjun and two other magazines namely Narsimha and Devnagar were also very popular in this area. Swatantrata started in 1939 by Puranchand Gupta and Jagdish Chandra Kulsiya. These papers were also popular. Then there was also the launch of Dainik Jagran, which is very popular and has a huge readership today. It is said that by 1924 there were almost 104 Hindi dailies in circulation. While some did have a very long run, others had a very short span of life. They did not survive. Another paper that brought in a revolution and popularized Hindi was Aaj by Shiv Prasad Gupta on September 5, 1920 from Banaras with Baburao Vishnu Parakar as its editor. The paper grew in circulation and was hailed for its stand on nationalism under the brilliant editing skills of Parakar. Parakar had been imprisoned earlier too for his nationalism. He advocated a revolution through his writings and vehemently opposed the stand of the British government who was suppressing the freedom of the press. Now, after his return from Africa, Gandhiji revolutionized this phase in India's struggle for freedom by steering the Satyagraha, Dandi March, Salt Satyagraha, non-violence movement, promotion of Khadi and the use of the press in a mighty way. His contribution to journalism was seen in all his newspapers like Young India, Indian Opinion, Navjeevan, Harijan and Harijan Sevak in different languages. Gandhiji launched a Gujarati newspaper on October 7, 1919 called the Navjeevan, and October 8, 1919 he launched an English daily called the Young India. Navjeevan, the Gujarati newspaper, actually became popular and had a circulation of 12,000 copies as compared to 1,200 copies of Young India, which led Gandhiji to launch a Hindi version of the paper Navjeevan on August 19, 1921. Although it is said that the subscriptions of the Hindi Navjeevan dropped down considerably from 12,000 to 1,400. India was and continues to have an ingrained caste system. Despite this modern era in many parts of India, the caste discrimination continues even today. So, Harijan was a word used by Gandhi to address the untouchables in order to encourage people to overcome this discrimination. He gradually started a newspaper called Harijan in English in February 1933. From the Yerwada jail in Pune, where he was imprisoned by the Britishers. He gradually also launched the Hindi edition of the same paper on February 23, 1933 from Delhi with Mr. Hari as the editor and titled it as Harijan Sevak. He drew the financial support for this paper from Ghanshyam Das Birla. The Britishers were very wary of Harijan and asked Gandhiji to submit the paper for proofreading before printing. Gandhiji refused the same with the demand that the freedom of the press was his right. The paper succumbed for this reason by its 10th issue. Gradually, due to financial losses, some of these papers closed down too. So, the newspapers were a weapon that silently and non-violently stoked in the fire of freedom all across India, and the British government were really scared of the power of the press. At the height of this movement, the British government brought in the Press Act 1910, due to which within a few years over 350 printing presses were punished with penalization and almost 300 newspapers were asked for security deposits. This pressurization, penalization and harassment led to the closure of almost 200 papers. However, this only catapulted the freedom movement, as this act of penalizing and trying to shut down the voices of the people of India only confirmed the mismanagement in India and the cruelty shown towards Indians by the East India Company and the Britishers. With all of that, we come to the fifth phase, that is the post-independence phase from 1948 to the present. Today, Hindi journalism and publishing has grown in leaps and bounds. The highest readership in India is that of the Hindi newspapers. Some of the popular names that you hear are Dainik Jagaran, Dainik Bhaskar, Amar Ujala, etc. Dainik Bhaskar has a name of its own as it promoted a secular and unifying approach, especially in troublesome times in India. Although it was initially published in 1956 as a Hindi daily called Subha Savere and Good Morning India from Gwalior, it gradually was named Bhaskar Samachar and then relaunched as Dainik Bhaskar by 1958. Another popular newspaper was Punjab Kesari, and it was begun by Lala Jagat Narayanji in 1965. There are so many newspapers today and it is impossible for me to name them all in this short little module that we are having this class on. However, it is noted that post-independence, newspapers contributed their mite to the concept of development journalism, and they highlighted the plight of the people so that the government will help the people. Many went through a huge turmoil during the days of emergency that happened in India as well. Some opposed the emergency with various expressions including circulation with blank papers, etc. However, over the period of years, their might grew. The people were slowly getting educated. As a result, the circulation also grew higher. However, currently, commercialization dominates the press. While it continues to give news and information, it is also to be noted that advertisement revenue has gained primary importance in the circulation of many papers, and which is why many papers sometimes compromise with their space for news with ads. So, given all of this, we still cannot deny that papers contribute a major chunk to our information. They are very important. They have been important in the history, in the freedom struggle, and they continue to contribute to our information. We are grateful to the presence of media, which has brought in a lot of information to the people of India. So, with that, we finish this topic on Hindi journalism and its 5 phases. See you next time with another module.